welcome in our session about the deployment process. And this first session is going to be about build servers, deployment, and application lifecycle management of your solution, so feature upgrade and solution upgrade. Really quick introduction, this is me. My name is Mirjam van Olst. I'm an MVP and a Microsoft Certified Master. I work for Avanade in the Netherlands, and I'm one of the organizers of the Dutch Information Worker User Group, the SharePoint User Group in the Netherlands. We publish a magazine, which you can get there at the end of the session. There's only 40 copies here, but we have more around the conference area, so just come up and grab a copy. I don't want to take them home, please.
And my name is Mastykarz. I'm a SharePoint consultant at Assemblies in the Netherlands. I'm SharePoint MVP for 4 years now. And I have a blog where I write about development and building internet sites. So the requirements that we had for today was to create automated builds or to create builds to decentralize the building process from the development machines, and to show you how you could adapt to changes that you will get during the project. So those are the two things that we will keep in mind throughout Dev 206. And the agenda for today, as Mirjam said, is first we'll start with discussing how you can leverage TFS build server to decentralize the building process. Then we will talk a little about deployment. Then we will move on to feature considerations, so what you have to do the moment you start building features into your project. And finally, we'll move on to upgrading features and solutions. So it's probably not new for everyone here to hear things like, well, it works on my machine, but I don't really understand why it does not work on yours. So it's probably you. Or the code is really poor, so you build it, and it works kind-of-ish, but it's slow, it breaks, errors and stuff. And Paul F, yeah, it's you, right?
I only had 3 of the 4, so.
The first, yeah, deploy, yeah, so probably you had the first 3, right? Yes. So that's exactly what I'm talking about. If you are on a team with Paul, you definitely want to ensure that you take those things into account. And so what you want to do is you want to have a process in place that makes it possible for you to check that the code's built on every machine possible, that there are no dependencies present on your machine that are not there on any other machine in your team. And you want to be sure that the code that you build and that you will deploy into production is good, right? So if you use TFS, you also have the chance to use TFS build server, and you can use that to centralize the building process of your project and to also have a link to test the code. So I have a demo here where I'd like to show you how you can leverage TFS build to have centralized process for building your code. So what I have here is a TFS team project, and beneath it I have 3 build definitions. So how it works, every single time that you want to build your code using TFS build, you have to have build definition that is linked to a build process template. And the way you can see those two is that build process template is a workflow 4.0, if I'm not wrong, workflow that describes a process, how you are going to build the code, and then build definition feeds parameters into that workflow. And out of the box, TFS build ships with a build process template that you can use for .NET and code. So what I have here is I've created a build, which is just out of the box build. So there's I didn't do anything more than to create a build. And if I build it now, let me queue new build. And what you see here is what I mentioned just before. You will see defaults here, which you can change per build, but you can just click queue, and it's going to start a build. And probably the first time of the day you will start the build, it's going to take a while because it has to start the build agent, which is responsible for doing the build. And the build is done. And when you go to the open drop option, it's going to open the location on the TFS build machine. And here you can see DLL built from the code. As you all know, this is probably great for C# project, but in SharePoint, we can't really do anything with DLL only, right? We have to have WSP. We have to have DLL packaged in a way we can deploy that to SharePoint. So what we want to do is we want to customize the build so that we will get not only DLL, but also the package. So for that, and the great thing is that if you use the Visual Studio 2010 SharePoint developer tools, it's really easy because the team that built the tools made it really easy for us. So what we can do is if I go to the packaging build, which is another build that I made, and that build is also based on the out-of-the-box available build process template. And the only thing that I did was to go to Advanced, and here in the MS Build Arguments option, I've added the /:sPackaging equals true, and that parameter will going to tell the tools not only to build the assembly, but also to create the package. So if I queue another build based on the packaging build definition, and if I just click queue, it's going to start another build. Once again, it's going to take a few moments to spin. As you can see here, it's just it's going really fast. And yes, it's almost there. It's building all right. And probably because it's going to build not only the code, but it also has to create the package. It takes a little bit more. And if you go to the Open Drop Folder option now, you can see that I have now not only the DLL that I've already had, but I also have the package. So from here, I could theoretically have that deployed to SharePoint. So the other thing that I told you about is that you not only want to ensure that your code builds independent of your development machine, but you also want to have some kind of process in place that allows you to check the quality of your code. One of the tools that we got from Microsoft is called SP-DisposeCheck. Who knows here SP-DisposeCheck? Probably everyone. So SP-DisposeCheck allows us to check for undisposed objects such as SP-Site and SP-Web in our code, because those are the common pitfalls that cause our code and then eventually farm to work really bad. So what I created here is yet another build that integrates with SP-DisposeCheck that is installed on the SP build machine. And after the code has been built, it's going to run SP-DisposeCheck. And if SP-DisposeCheck is going to find any errors, so any undisposed object, is going to fail the build, so that the developer knows that he has to fix some things. And for that, I have created a whole new, I've extended the out-of-the-box available build process template. And let me open that guy for you. I can do it from here. And if I go to here, you can see that that's just a workflow for workflow. And let me just scroll to the right place, because that's just really a lot of activities here. And what I want to show you is the place where the code builds, and which is here. And the only thing that I did is I've added that block, that clause, which will going to run SP-DisposeCheck using the invoke process activity. And what I do here, if I go to properties, what you can see here is that what I do is I call SP-DisposeCheck, and I store the the outcome and error code. Because if SP dispose check runs, if the exit code, the Windows exit code is 0, it's OK. If it's anything else, it's bad. So after I've run SP dispose check, I will check the exit code. And if it's anything else than 0, I'm going to fail the build, which is here. So I will set the build property to failed. And then I will throw an exception, which will say that SP dispose check failed. So I have some code written by Paul. And you can guess what's going to happen now. If I queue a build that integrates with SP dispose check and is going to check his code.
Should have used that using statement after all.
It's going to run, well, you can see it from here, right? We did some tests, and it didn't really look well, Paul. So fingers crossed, there's still hope.
Yeah, but I've already seen the primary path here. It's not on.
So the best part would actually be if it worked. Yes, and it failed, just as we expected. Yes, Paul, come on, you should know better. So, so if we go here, we can easily see that the build failed. And if we go to the log, we can zoom in into the place where SP dispose check run, and we can see here where it actually failed. And we can see it from here that it's the site columns content types event receiver add description to field. So it's not your code. I was just kidding. Sorry. So you can exactly see where the code that is wrong is, and from here you can go to exactly a place to fix it. So what you see here is that it's in the site columns content types event receiver.cs line 36. So if we go to the code, it's going to be here. And let me just show you, it's the event receiver here, and it's on the line, well, that's just huge. So it was in the line 36. And what you can see is that SP dispose check fails on that line. So what you actually see here is that SP dispose checks also reports false positives. So it's sometimes, and one of those cases you can see here, it says that you haven't disposed the root web of a site, which you actually should not do. So in order to work around it, what we can do is to create a method, which I have here. Let me uncomment that. And if you use the SP dispose check ignore attribute on that method, you can pass the ID of the error that you want to ignore, which is here, and you can see that in the log. If I go back to that, it was probably that one. You can see it here. It's 140. So if you go to the build now, or to the code, you can pass that ID here, and you can say false positive. And from that, what you can do now is to change that code into calling the method get root web, pass our site collection there, and save that. And now we have to check it in because the code is being built externally. So we have to check it in, and that's the one here. Fixed Paul's code. Yeah. Where's the application? Yeah, it's here. I will check it in. And if I trigger another build, it should work correct now. So let me just queue it. Fingers crossed. Should be OK now. Exciting, isn't it? Will it work? It's running SP dispose check, all right. And it's green. How cool is that? It works. We just fixed the code live on stage, and it took us, like, nothing. So another thing that I wanted to is what you can actually do with TFS build is, so if you have the WSP build, you probably not only would like it to be built, but you also would like to have it tested, right? So in order to test the code that is in WSP, you would have to deploy it to your shepherding farm and to have automated tests run on that site. So one way in which you could do that is to extend the build process template and add some more activities here. Let me get the right window in front. That's the one here. So instead of, or after SP exposure, you would just add some more things here just to be sure that you can move the WSP from the drop location, deploy it in SharePoint, and run the test. Another way in which you could approach that is to have a monitor on the drop location, and every single time WSP is going to be added there, so every single time a build will build a WSP, that monitor will run some PowerShell script. So what I have here, if I go to my drop location server, or the place where it built, so I have here a test machine that I can use for tests. So as you have seen, all the builds that I made went to, and you can see it from the builds. If I just quickly go to the SP disposal build, the latest one, you can see it from here that it has been built on the SP build. So I want that to be, instead of SP build, SP test, right? So if I change that to, if I queue new build, and instead of SP build, I will put here SP test. And on SP test, which is another machine, I have a location called builds. And in the background, I have a tool that I made really quickly, which is probably a Metro tool, which is really minimal and square. And it's minimal and square, right? Well, there is some 3D there, so I'm not sure with that. Anyway, so as you can perhaps see here, that tool looks at the C builds map folder, and every single time a WSP is going to be added there, it's going to run the C deploy PS1, from which you can see only the P. So every single time a WSP is going to be added here, that tool will execute that script. And to prove that it works, I have here the SP test farm, which has no WSPs. And if I move back to my SP def and queue the build, let's just give it a few moments to spin. And what you should see now is that when it's done, it's going to deploy the WSP to the SP test, and the tool is going to execute the PowerShell script, which will add the WSP to the farm. We're almost there. It's done. And now let's move to the SP test. And if I hit F5, tension, exciting. Will it work? It works. So it's added. It actually isn't deployed because that just takes a little too long. So it is here. It works. So that's another way that you can use to have WSP deployed from TFS build, to have it deployed onto test, and to run some tests. So with that, hand over word to Mirjam, and she's going to tell you something more about deployment.
Yep. So with Visual Studio 2010, we don't really see where files are deployed anymore, because Visual Studio basically does everything for us. You just hit deploy or package, and then hand over your package to the IT pros to get it deployed on another environment or to SP build. But still, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You don't have to know where files go, as long as everything works. But as soon as you hit a problem, you need to know where your files are deployed to be able to troubleshoot your problem. So it's still important to know where files are going, even though you don't have to manually do anything to get them there. So different types of customizations are being deployed to different locations. And what deployment location your files are deployed to depends on the type of solution that you're building. If you're building a farm solution, files can be deployed all over the place. They can be deployed to different locations on your file system, on your server. But if you're, and it can be deployed into SharePoint as well, into your content database, depending on how you build your solution. If you're using a sandbox solution, all your files will be deployed into the content database, and none of it will be deployed on the file system. Because that's how sandbox solutions are built. They're not supposed to touch anything except for the site collection that you're in. So it really depends on what type of solution that you're building and on what type of customization that you're building. And you need to know where files are going if you ever want to troubleshoot anything. Yeah, so this is basically what I just said. If you deploy a farm solution, it can go anywhere, different places on the server and different places within your content database. And if you use sandbox solutions, they only go into the content database. And the package will always be stored in the solutions gallery in your site collection. Features are very important in SharePoint because almost all the artifacts that we can create are deployed as features. And that means a feature is always deployed into the SharePoint root folder or the 14 hive, but Microsoft would like us to call it the SharePoint root folder because that will stick with the next version as well, into the features folder. Visual Studio will namespace features for you, which is very convenient because it means you can't get clashes. You can imagine if you deploy more than one solution into a single environment, you might get two features that are called content types. For instance, if you namespace them, you won't get a clash with the same folder names. Project features, because of the fact that they are namespace, will always be listed together, and yeah, you don't get any clashes with that. Once the features are deployed onto the file system and all the files that you deploy with the features are deployed into the features folder, as soon as you activate a feature, those files might be distributed to other locations. So, for instance, if you have a web art feature and you activate that feature, the web art will be uploaded into the site collection and into the web arts gallery. So that will be done from that feature folder, but it will be deployed into the feature folder first. If you want to troubleshoot, you need to make sure that your feature and all the files that should be in it are on your file system first, but after that you need to make sure that files are deployed to the right location from there as well. If we look at assemblies, because we still have assemblies, it's not all XML that we're doing. It can either go to the global assembly cache, which is C Windows assembly, which means that all your code runs in full trust, and it's the most common approach. We talked a little bit about code access security policies yesterday, but most people will just deploy them full trust, and that's a fully accepted approach as well now. In 2007, we were still talking about, no, you should maybe not do that and use cache policies, it's safer. But in 2010, you can just use deploy everything to the global assembly cache, basically. And the good thing about that is it works for all artifacts. The other option is we can deploy to the bin folder in the inetpub folder, which means that we run under partial trust. AC talked about that yesterday, and it will be subject to cache policies. It's the safest way, but it doesn't work for all the artifacts that we might want to deploy. It doesn't work for feature and event receivers, it doesn't work for timer jobs, it doesn't work for workflows. If we want to deploy a visual design, we have even more options. Obviously, a visual design can consist of master pages, style sheets, and images, sometimes XSLT files as well. And all those files can either be deployed to the file system, into the SharePoint root folder, or into the SharePoint server. Obviously, deploying into your SharePoint site collection, into your content database, means that you have more control over them because you can access them through the browser. You can also deploy them onto the file system, which means that they are automatically available throughout your farm. Yeah, it depends on what you're doing with it, basically. In SharePoint 2007, we had a problem with master pages. If we would deploy version over version over version into the content database, they would corrupt sometimes. In 2010, that doesn't really happen. So a master page, most of the time, you would deploy to the master page gallery. Style sheets, the same thing. You will deploy them usually into the style sheet gallery, but you can also deploy them into the SharePoint root folder, into the template layouts, and then an LSIT styles folder. With images, we have even more options, and sometimes images you do want to deploy them onto the file system, and we will see that in the next session. For instance, if you want to use an icon, a specific icon for your web template, if you're using a farm solution for that, you will deploy that to the layouts folder because your site collection doesn't exist if you're creating a site collection from that web template, so you don't know where to deploy it otherwise. If you're deploying images into your site collection, you can either deploy it into any image library that you know exists in your site collection, or you can deploy it into the site collection images library. If you want to use that, you will need publishing features to be on. If we're deploying web parts and pages, we have a lot of options with what type of pages we want to create, and depending on what type of pages we create, we also determine the deployment location. If we're creating application pages, they will be deployed to the layouts folders, always. And an application page can always be accessed from any site collection through the _layouts path. So you would use that usually for configuration settings, for stuff that you would access from the site settings page, stuff that's being used by site collection administrators or site owners most of the times. If we want to deploy publishing pages, you will do that to the pages library. Again, you will need the publishing features to be on, to be activated on your site in order to have that library. If you don't have that on, you will have the site pages library, and you can deploy wiki pages to it. So they will go into the site pages library within your site collection. The difference is on a publishing page, you will have web part zones, and on a wiki page, you will just have one big zone where you can drag all your web parts and your content into. Then we have web art pages, which can be deployed basically to any folder within your site collection or underneath your site, your subsite, or into any document library. If you deploy them to a folder that's not a document library, you won't be able to access them from the browser. But in some cases, that's good because you don't want people to fiddle with it. And then we have web parts, which are deployed into the web art gallery, also in your site collection. So there's one web art gallery for each site collection, and all the pages libraries can be specific to a subsite as well.
So it was probably Paul who started the talk again. Yes, it's you. Started the whole talk about how many features should you have, which scope, whether they should be visible or not, and how you could approach that. As Mirjam said, features are probably one of the most important parts of your project, because every single time you will want to deploy your work to SharePoint, you'll have to use them. So the moment you start adding them into your project, it's wise to spend just a few seconds to try to get as clear possible answers to those questions, like how many of them should I have? At which scope? Should I make them visible or not? So how many features is just right? Is it 1? Is it 5? Is it 10? Any ideas?
Yes. 2 depends.
42. 42. Yeah. Thank you. It doesn't work. Will it work now? Yes, it works. So the answer is, it depends. It really depends. Once boring, I know. Sorry, guys. Predictable, right? So it really depends on what you are trying to achieve. And if you'll have, for example, too few of them, the first thing that you will see is, like, every single feature has one scope attached to it. That means that that feature can be activated at that particular scope only. And if you'll create one single feature for everything, that means that you will deploy some artifacts not at their scope. Unfortunately, if you will get too many of them, what you will get is dependencies. So imagine you will create one feature to provision one content type, and then you will create another content type that inherits from the content type 1, and you will put content type 2 into another feature. Those two, so what you will create is an indirect dependency between feature 1 and 2, where the whole thing will only work if the feature 1 is already active and content type 1 is already there. Otherwise, it will break. So another thing that you want to take into account is trying to get everything in place right so that you can easily keep track of what is where. If you will create one feature for everything, you will get really a long list of everything that is there. And on one hand, it's easy because everything is there, right? So if you look, no matter what, it is there. On the other hand, if you add another one, because at some point you will want to split, it's going to be difficult for you to track what's where and to add the right spice to right features. On the other hand, if you'll create too many of them, if you'll create too many features in your project, you will get like enormous list of all the features that you have, and every single time that you will add a new spice to your project, Visual Studio 2010 SharePoint Developer Tools will try to do some work for you, and what they will do is that they will automatically try to find the right feature for your newly added SPI, and they will add them somewhere. And there will be no single way, there will be no easy way for you to find out where, unless you will have to walk through all of them and say, yeah, is it the last one? Is it the one in the middle? So that can really impede your work, and to take some time just to try to get them out of that one and to add them right to the place where you want them to be. Finally, the last thing that you have to deal with if you create a few is you will get upgrade challenges. So every single time you want to upgrade a feature, and Mirjam is going to take on that to talk more about it in a few minutes, is you can do it either in XML or in code. Either way, you will have one single class that knows update of every single SPI in it. So it's going to be really a huge list of XML and code for one single feature, and it's going to be difficult for you to keep track of what that update does and for what. On the other hand, if you create too many features, what you will get is that you will create dependencies not only between activating feature 1 and 2, but also for updates. So every single time you will update feature 2, you might want to depend, or you might depend on another version of feature 1. So what you basically should strive to is to find a balance between too many and too few, right? As I said, every single feature has a scope, and it has only one scope. And you use features to provision artifacts to SharePoint. And all of those artifacts have a certain scope that they belong to. For example, a web part is provisioned to the web part gallery, which you have only one on your site collection, and which is located at the root. So it makes a lot of sense to provision a web part using a site collection scope feature. On the other hand, there are, for example, web templates that can be provisioned either on a site collection level or farm level. So it depends a lot on what you are trying to build and what you are trying to achieve to get the right scope for your artifacts and to get those artifacts to properly scoped features. Whenever you try to get the right scope, there are a few things that you have to keep in mind, and there are a few type of artifacts that you have to think of. One of those is custom action that you could activate on every possible scope. You can create, for example, a link on one web only. You could add, for example, that same link. So imagine having a link on a site settings page to your app page. And you could add exactly the same link on a site collection level site so that you can access that link from any single web in that site. On the other hand, you could activate exactly the same link for every single site collection in a web app. So whenever you put a custom action in a feature, no matter the scope, you will never get an error. What you will see, though, is that if you are not careful and you will put it not in the right place, the right scope, what you will see that your functionality that might not have been built and tested with other scopes than the one that you thought of initially might break. And you won't see it up front. You will see it only when a user clicks on a link and it's going to break. So another thing that you have to keep in mind are the web.config mods. And just not to talk about whether you should do them or not. If you do, as we all know, the only way to do them is in code, right? There is no XML that you can use. And because it's code, theoretically, you could do it on every single scope, right? Because it's code. I mean, it's up to you. The problem is, as the name says, web.config belongs to a IIS site, which is links to a web app. And there it is. That's the right and the only scope that you should ever use or provision web.config mods in code. If you do it otherwise, it's going to break. Because if you, for example, use a site collection scoped feature to do that, there is no way for you to control if it's been already there or not. And what you can do is to get duplicated entries in a queue, and every single time the web.config mods will be reapplied, they'll be reapplied a few times. So that's going to take time, which isn't bad, but the moment you deactivate it, they will be still there in a queue, because you have multiple site collection features that are active that have added those entries into the queue, right? So if you ever do web.config mods, web application scope is the only scope that applies to it. And probably the last thing that Paul already discussed yesterday a little is whether you want your features to be visible or not. And one thing in here, well, it depends, right? It depends on the features that you have, and it depends on what you want to do with them. So the great thing is, if you make them visible in the overview, is that it gives you quickly an idea of what's active, what's not, what kind of functionality is available in your site. On the other hand, if you create like tons of them, it will be a huge list, and you will not know anything anymore. Because it's going to be like a huge list of all the ISC feature 1, ISC feature 2, and it's going to be like 200. So you don't want to do that as well. And if you make features visible, what you will be able to do is to activate, deactivate them through UI. So theoretically, site collection owner or a site owner is able to add or remove new functionality to his site. If you don't do it, if you hide them, the only way for them to activate them is going to be via code like PowerShell script, sorry. And for that, they will have to have the access to the server, which probably they will not ever get. And finally, the other thing is, as you know, with great responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility. And the moment you keep your features visible, you have to take into account that people might want to activate them or deactivate them. And you have to design your feature and your code for that. You have to check that everything works. So what if someone deactivates it and activates it again? Will everything work? Will it break? So you have to test for those scenarios as well. And you want to be sure that none of your core functionality is in a feature that is visible. Because if you build a specific site or a specific solution which depends on a feature, you don't want your users to be able to deactivate it, because they would have a site without the functionality and where the site depends on that thing, right? So whenever you create a feature, take into account what it does, what it's for, and how you want your users to work with it. And Mirjam is going to tell you more about how you can deal with upgrading features and solutions.
Yep. With the 2010, we now have the option to upgrade our features and create new versions of an existing feature. Before you start your project, you should really think about a next version of that project. I mean, no successful project will stick to one version. So you should have an approach ready before you start. In 2010, the approach might be feature upgrade, especially if you have stuff like content types, because you're not allowed to change your content type after you deployed it. But it might also just be a retract and reinstall of your solution, or maybe you will install another solution next to the one that you've already got. So it doesn't have to be feature upgrade. There's no one solution to creating a next version of your project. But it might be feature upgrade because it's pretty powerful to use this. We have two approaches in feature upgrade. We can create a declarative upgrade, or we can create an upgrade in code. Obviously, the one in code will give you the most power because you can do whatever you like to your existing features and to your existing sites. When you're thinking about upgrade of your project, also think about existing sites. Do only new sites need to get any new features or changes to existing features, or do existing sites need to get those changes as well? If that's the case, then feature upgrade might be the solution to that problem for you. The details of the deployment of an upgrade, again, depend on the solution type. So if you create a farm solution, the upgrade of your solution will work differently from when you're creating a sandbox solution. And we will look into that in more detail later on. If we are upgrading a feature, you will definitely have to upgrade or increase the version number of your existing version. Of your existing feature. If you don't increment the version number, you will never get a feature upgrade. So that's something that you have to do. The next step is you can choose whether you want to make declarative changes or changes in code and use the feature upgrading event in the event receiver, in the feature receiver, to make those changes in your existing functionality. You can also use both, obviously. So we will walk through all the tags that are available to us on the feature in the feature XML with regards to feature upgrade. So the first one's the feature number, the version number. If no version is specified, which is the case normally if you just create a feature in Visual Studio and you don't add a version to it, it will be 0. Make sure if you create version numbers that you get some sort of structure for yourself. So you could do major version, .minor version, .build number, .revision. You can come up with another structure for yourself as long as you come up with a structure and it makes sense in your project. The version number in the feature.xml corresponds to the version number in the SP feature definition class. There's also a version number in the SP feature class, but that's a different version number. So be aware if you're mixing up code and declarative approach that you don't get the wrong version number and get confused. If we want to do an upgrade, we will need upgrade actions, which we can define in the upgrade actions element. And it will specify how we will upgrade our feature. Will we use code or will we use a declarative approach? And the feature or the upgrade actions element can contain several sub-elements. The VersionRange element, the ApplyElementManifests, AddContentTypeField, custom action upgrade, and the MapFile element, and we will go through all of those. So the first one's the VersionRange element, which will specify from which version to which version you want to apply the actions that are within this tag. So in this case, anything between version 1.0.0.0 and version 2.0.0.0 will be upgraded. So all the features that have a version number between those two will be upgraded. Any features that have version number 1.0.0.0 will be upgraded as well. Any features that are already on version number 2.0.0.0 will not be upgraded. They are already upgraded. So the begin version is inclusive and the end version is exclusive. Any actions that are not in a VersionRange element, but that are directly specified under the upgrade actions element, will be upgraded on every, or will be executed on every upgrade. So you need to be careful with that, because you might add the same field twice or 3 times, 4 times. You don't want to do that. We can also apply extra manifest files to our existing features, and we will use the ApplyElementManifests element for that. And within that, we can choose whether we want to apply an extra element file or an extra element manifest. So the element file, for instance, could be resources, you can see in here, and the element manifest is the actual elements.xml file that we can add to it. So you specify the location of those files in here. We can also add content type fields, and we can only do that declaratively, or we should only do that declaratively. So what we specify if we want to do that is the content type ID, so the content type that we want to add the field to. We will specify the field ID, and we will specify whether we want to push this change down to lists that are already using this content type. We can use CustomUpgradeAction, and this is the most powerful one, because this is basically the one where we specify that we want to use code from the feature upgrade feature receiver. What we specify here is a parameter, a switch one, so we can check whether this is the delete field update that we're doing. You will see that in code in the demo later on. And you can give a parameter, say in this case the field name, so we want to add a field to our, or maybe in this case remove a field from our content type, and we can do that by specifying the field name in here. This way we can use the same code more than once. You could obviously just code everything in there and not use any of this. But that would mean that you would have to maybe write the same code twice. And you definitely want to specify which upgrade this code belongs to, so you don't run the same code on every upgrade. Yeah, so this is just a bit of explanation in text, and it's pretty much what I just said. So what's important is that the feature upgrading event receiver is called synchronously with other upgrade actions in order of declaration. So the order in which you specify the elements in the upgrade actions element could be important, depending on what you're doing in it. If one depends on the other, make sure that you get the order right. If the feature is activated in 10 sites, the feature upgrading code will be called 10 times and it will run 10 times. So if you are performing a lot of actions in there, that will take a lot of time. Running the upgrade will take a lot of time, and your site or your farm might be down for a long time. So think about that when you're doing that. You don't want to recreate your entire site in that code. Then you might just want to create new sites. And we have a MapFile element. I haven't seen this one being used that often, but we could either rename an existing file or we could move an existing file from one folder to another. This example is a rename, so you can see that we move a file from path oldname.gif to path newname.gif. We could also map to a different folder structure. A couple of object model changes were necessary to make feature upgrade work. And the first one is the SP feature definition.version property that we needed so we can specify the version of an existing feature instance. So that's an important one. We also now have the query features method, and that's available on different scopes. So you have query features method on the SP web service class, which means you get all the features that might need upgrading within the farm. We can also do that on the SP web application, so you get the features that might need upgrading on the web application, on a content database, or on a site collection. You can use query filters method to filter on scope on features that need upgrading, and you can also specify a specific feature ID so that you can find instances of that specific feature. And we have an upgrade method to actually upgrade the feature instances. And we will see why we need that. If we want to upgrade a farm solution, we first need to upload the new solution into the solution store in central administration. And sorry, we need to specify a couple of parameters for that. Once we do that, the file's uploaded, the solution might be deployed, but the existing feature instances, they won't be updated yet. So all your features in your sites will still show their old versions. In order to do that in a farm solution, we have two choices. We can either use psconfig or run the configuration wizard, which means you will take down your farm for a while because you have to run that. And you will do an in-place upgrade, and this means build to build. So if you're going to the next version of SharePoint, this will be V to V, version to version. But for an upgrade of your features, it will be upgraded build. You can also upgrade sites one by one by using the query features method to identify what sites or what feature instances in what sites need upgrading, and then run the spfeature.upgrade method. Obviously, if you have a whole lot of sites, you might not want to do that, because it will take a long time to iterate over everything. But if you choose the first one, you probably want to do that not during office hours. If we're using a sandbox solution, this works in a completely different way. We will need to upload a new WSP file into the solution gallery in our site collection, and we will need to create a new name for that file. So Visual Studio will normally create the same name for you. You will have to rename that file. It needs to have the same solution ID, though. If you upload it again with a different name, SharePoint will show an upgrade button in the UI, which you can just press, and that will upgrade the solution for you. The new solution will be activated. The old solution will automatically be deactivated, so SharePoint will do that for you. And all the feature instances within that site collection will upgrade automatically. So you don't have to use query features or spfeature.upgrade if you're using sandbox solutions. So it's important to distinguish between the two methods, because you have to work in a different way depending on what approach you choose. So we have a quick demo. Going back to our farm. Oh, this is SP test.
Sorry.
Go into our dev environment, into Visual Studio. We'll close all the build server stuff. We don't need that. It's small enough as it is. We'll go into the Solution Explorer, and what we'll do is we'll add a field to an existing content type. So we will create a new field, add that to our content type, and then we'll later see that the business isn't quite happy, so we'll make another change to it.
You want to take another branch. Take the upper branch, because that's the base.
Okay. Are you sure?
I thought I was. Not anymore.
No, this is the right branch.
Sorry. Apologies. I didn't say anything.
So this is the featured XML of the feature that we're going to upgrade. And you can see that I have a couple of things specified in here. We have an upgrade actions element. We have a version range element with begin version 0.0.0.0, because we didn't specify a version number either for our feature, and an end version of 1. We will apply a new element manifest, which is in the fields 2 element or module in our solution, and it has a new elements file. And then we'll add a new content type field to the content type. This is the content type ID. You will have to believe me on that one. We specified a field ID. You can remember this one maybe, or at least the first bit. And we will push down any changes. You can see that we have another change in here, but we'll talk about that in a second. We won't use that one at the moment. So if we go to the fields, you can see here we have the elements file in the fields 2 module. And you can see that that field ID that we just saw is in here. It's a new Boolean field that's named featured article, which means that we can nominate articles to be shown, to be highlighted, so to say. The display name will be featured article, and it will be deployed to the same group as the other features were deployed to. And I will go to our site. Yeah, this is the right side. Into the articles library. And what we will see if we create a new article, just to prove that it's true, there's no featured article down here at the moment. So on the feature, right here, the feature that we want to upgrade, we will show the properties. You can see that this now is version number version number 1. So when I deploy this, I will deploy the feature with version number 1. I will open up PowerShell just to show you something. Be aware that if you're doing this, if you're using PowerShell to upgrade your features or to test your features, you will have to close and open up the PowerShell tool every time you deploy a new solution, because otherwise you won't see any upgraded features. It's very annoying, but there's no way around that. So what you can see, it's finished now, and there are no features that have to be upgraded. So I will deploy this solution, and thanks to CKS Dev, I can just click deploy, because I changed the default action for a deployment, and it will actually upgrade my solution. You can see that in the properties of good view. Okay, so this succeeded. We'll close PowerShell again, upload it again. Open the same file, and now it should show a feature that needs upgrading.
Oh.
There's a feature missing. I have no clue what we did there. It seems to think that the web art feature is missing, which is remarkable. We have the web art.
Check if it's in the package.
Web parts are in the package.
Ensure web part, yeah, okay.
Okay, so I don't know what that's all about. We can show this. The site should still be the same, so you shouldn't see any changes yet because we didn't actually upgrade the feature yet. We did, of course, deploy a new solution, so we did an application pool recycle, which means that it takes a long time. That way it works. Ah, right.
Probably timing issue.
Yeah, I was probably too quick. So what you can see, or not, is that we have one feature that needs upgrading, and that's our feature. You can try to remember the ID, 50D4. That now is has version number 0, and it needs to be upgraded to version number 1, although this doesn't tell you that. So what I can do is run the PowerShell code to actually do the upgrade. So that's this. So we will run the query features. We will find all the features that need upgrading, and then we will actually do the upgrade on those features. And it will tell us that it's done once it's done. It tells us it's done. That's good. And we will run query features again, but this time not only request the files or the features that need upgrading, but we will show all of them. Because I want to show you that we now have a feature with the same ID that has version 1 in there. So that worked. It upgraded, at least according to the output PowerShell gives us. So if we open up a new feature, if you want to create a new feature, we should now see the featured article in there. But we don't. So the feature is upgraded. We have a new version, version 1. We specified that it needs to add a field. If we upgrade to version 1, it needs to add it to the content type. It needs to push the changes down. So the field should be added in there. We can check to see whether it is in the content type, maybe. Into the content types, in the article content type. Yeah, so we see featured article in here. It should be pushed down to the side as well, because we specified that we wanted it to be pushed down to the side. But it worked in everything we tested. Victor's saying it's broken in one of the CUs.
I think we just proved that it's broken.
Yeah. But we tested this about 20 times, and it worked every time. We could create a new site.
Yeah.
And
You should deploy through the build server, then it'll work.
Yeah.
I will create a new site and
Just go to gallery, hit the update button in the browser.
there is already. Okay, it's creating a new site. In the meantime, I will show you the other changes that we made to the feature. So we have another upgrade specified in here. We will upgrade to 1.1. And we have in here add description to field, because the business wasn't really happy with just showing the field. They didn't know what to do with it. So we now add a description in there that says select to highlight this article. We also give the field name as a parameter to highlight the featured article. And if we go into the event receiver, we can see that we have the upgrade action feature upgrading in here. The upgrade action name should be add description to field. That was what you saw in the XML. And when we do that, we will add a field. We will add the description to the field. Waldek already took care of the dispose check error in there. And what we should also think about is we fix this now for any upgrades. But if we create a new instance of the feature, obviously we also want to add that description to it. So we need to add the same functionality into the feature activated. And we also need to add the element, the field, into the into the original content type. So in here, this is the list of fields that are part of our content type. And we want to add our new field in there, the featured article in there as well. Okay. So first I'll try and see if we can now see the changes in a list. It's still not in the list. Okay, well, I will still deploy the new solution. What I need to do, obviously, is upgrade the version of my feature. Come on. Oh, close that. No. See, the version number is still 1.0, and we will make this 1.1, so that it will upgrade again. Okay. We will deploy this solution. Or upgrade the solution, really. Close PowerShell. Open it up again. We'll use the same PowerShell for this. See if I'm too fast again. So you can see one feature needs upgrading and now has version 1, which is correct. That's what we just did. We will upgrade the feature. Done. So if we check again, we should now see one feature that has version 1.1. And we do. So that worked again. Now it will be very interesting to see if we have any upgrades in the existing sites now. Takes more time loading again, just because we did a deploy. Okay. Go to our articles list, create a new item. Okay.
And if you go back to the dev 206.
It doesn't want to upgrade our existing instances. It should though still, because we specified that. It's because I'm on here and not down there. Yeah. So, yeah. That was what we wanted to show for the feature upgrading code. If there are any questions, just feel free to ask them now. Yeah, go ahead.